This is what you can send to someone, and what they now need to do to recover this is to apply the decryption key to B prime will give you back B1, this is going to give you B2, this is going to give you B3 and so on. Okay, so this is how most of these encryption algorithms are going to work. They are going to use, if you have symmetric key cryptography, the encryption key and decryption key are one and the same. Okay, because it's the same key, and the assumption is the key is only known to the two parties who are communicating, not to anyone else. So no one else can take B prime and try to extract or generate B prime to begin with. Okay? In public key cryptography, these are two different keys. Okay? So if you are sending a message to someone, you can use their public key, which you know, encrypt it, so that only they can decrypt. Because the private key is only known to that party. So if I want to send a message to a colleague, I will use their public key, which everyone knows, and including me, encrypt the message, send it to them. And I'm assured that only they can decrypt it and figure out what the contents are, because only they know the private key. This is how I will send an encrypted message to someone. Is that clear? Okay, I'll come back to using this in a little while when we do secure email and all. Okay, so here is a problem with using public key cryptography. Okay, so let's say we want an intruder to impersonate Alice. Okay. So the intruder is Trudy. So Trudy is going to send a message to Bob saying, "I'm Alice." Okay, Trudy is impersonating Alice. Okay, so Bob is then going to try to send a nonce back to Alice, which Trudy is going to intercept. Okay, it's a network, so you can intercept this message. Okay. Now, what Trudy is going to do is she has to send an encrypted version of the nonce. Okay. Trudy is going to use her private key, not Alice's private key, to encrypt that nonce. So use the private key here. That's why it says D of T. He sends the nonce back. Okay. Now, for Bob to authenticate that this is Alice, Bob needs Alice's public key. Okay. So the assumption is that Bob doesn't have a database of everyone's public keys. Okay. So Bob has to go and get the public key from somewhere. Okay. So Bob is then going to basically somehow try to get Alice's public key. One way to do this is to send a message to Alice saying, "Give me your public key." Okay. People put up their public keys on their website. As you may have seen, if you go to some website, they'll say, "Here is my PGP key, okay, which is my public key." Okay. That's the way. So basically, let's say Bob goes to Alice's web page to get her public key. Okay. Now, Trudy can now intercept that message, or can actually go to the web page and change the public key as well. Okay, so in this case, we are just simply assuming that Trudy is able to intercept this attempt to get Alice's public key and instead send her public key instead, claiming to be Alice's public key. Okay, so Bob has gone to get Alice's key. Trudy intercepts that request and sends her key, saying this is Alice's key. Okay, Bob doesn't know this, so Bob assumes that that is actually Alice's key, and then you basically use Trudy's key instead of Alice's key to decrypt that message. The nonce comes back, and you think that Alice has actually sent that message to you. Okay. So this is referred to as also man in the middle attack and so on. So it basically allows you to impersonate others. Okay. So what has happened is this is not a problem with public key cryptography. Okay. The problem is that key distribution is the issue. Okay, so any encryption algorithm is only going to be as secure as a key distribution. Okay, so you need not only a good encryption algorithm, you also need a secure way to share keys. Okay, so here the problem was that Bob did not have a good way to get Alice's public key, and you were able to break the protocol at that point. Okay. So this is equivalent to, you want to protect your home, you buy a big lock. Okay, you lock your house and you keep the key under the mat. Okay, so now if the key is not secure, the lock is not going to be secure either. Okay, same problem. The encryption algorithm is secure, but key distribution is not secure. So if you can get somebody else's key or impersonate your key as someone else's key, then there is a problem with the protocol. So this is something to keep in mind. Many secure protocols get broken not because there's a problem with the protocol, but there's a problem with how keys are distributed. Okay. So this is exactly what I was talking about, man in the middle attack, which is the previous protocol. I'm going to skip that. But that's a problem. Okay, when we come back to setting up SSL connection between a browser and a server, we'll come back to this problem. If you are able to impersonate the server certificate or key, you will actually have the exact same problem, okay, where the server is sending messages that can be decrypted and re-encrypted. Yes, I'll come back to that in a little while. So let me now talk a little bit about digital signatures using public key. Okay, so goal of a digital signature is to sign a document using an electronic key rather than just as you sign a piece of paper. Okay, you want to have a digital signature that you can assign to a piece of paper, electronic document, which serves the same purpose. Okay, that somebody can verify it's your signature and that you actually signed it, and once you sign it, you can't claim that you did not sign it. Okay, just as if you write a check, send the check to your bank, if the bank validates that your signature on the check matches the signature there on the record, they will cash the check. Okay? And you can't claim if the signature is actually authentic that it's not your signature. If somebody makes a bad impersonation, you can say this doesn't match, so you did not do a good job matching the signature. Same is true here. If you send a signed document, the other party should be able to verify that you signed it. Okay? And if you actually signed it, you should be able to, you shouldn't be able to claim to the other party that you did not sign. And a third is if the document is actually altered, okay, if somebody is trying to alter it, then you should be able to say that's not what the document I signed. So you need all of those properties. And the simple way you are going to be able to do this is take a document which we will call message M. It's an arbitrary length string. Any document can be thought of a string or a set of bits of arbitrary length. You can simply take that string and sign it with your private key. You can encrypt it with your private key. And you can present this encrypted version of this string to anyone saying this is a signed version of the document. Now, since your public key is well known, anyone can verify that you signed the document by simply taking your public key, which is here, applying it to the encrypted version of the document, and the original document will be recovered. This will tell them that only you could have encrypted the document in that way. Okay. If somebody else encrypts the document, that will be a different encrypted version, it will be a different string. So you can simply look at the encrypted version of the document, assign, take your public key, and verify that you could have signed it, that you have signed it. You cannot claim you did not sign it because only you know your private key. Okay, so D of M or B of M is a string that only you could have generated, given it. Okay. So this basically gives us all of these properties that we want, and you cannot fake a message. Your repudiation, which says you cannot claim you did not sign it if you actually signed it, because you know your private key document that is actually signed by your private key. It's encrypted with your private key, so you can't claim you didn't sign it and so on. Okay. So this is the simplest form of a digital signature. You can simply use public key cryptography and encrypt any document, and that's equivalent to you having signed it. Now this happens to be extremely expensive computationally. So we are going to see some ways by which we can make it more computationally efficient. And the reason for this is public and private keys are very long keys. So the longer the key, more computationally expensive is it to encrypt and decrypt. Okay? And in some cases the keys may be 124 bits long, so that's going to make it very expensive to encrypt and decrypt them. So the question is, can you take the same idea that we had on the previous slide, but develop a more efficient version of a digital signature? Okay, so let's see how you can do that. So one way to do this is to actually not sign the document itself, but sign a hash of that document. Okay, this is going to be called a message digest. Okay, message digest is a summary of the message. Digest essentially means summary. Okay, so you take any arbitrary signed document. Let's say it's you write up your exam. Okay, final exam is let's say you wrote 25 pages of your exam. Okay, then you want to sign it saying I actually submitted and I'm sending you a signed copy. Instead of encrypting a 25-page long document, which is going to be computationally expensive, you can first hash that 25 pages into a summary of the document, which is a fixed length hash. Then you can simply sign the hash. You can send the document and the signed hash, which can then be used as a digital signature. Okay, that's the exact idea here. So what you do is, you take the document M. The first thing you are going to do is apply a hash function, which will take a variable length string, any arbitrary length document, and convert it into a fixed length hash. The hash will be a fixed length, let's say 512 bytes or some smaller string, as opposed to an arbitrary length string. And then what you take is you take hash of M, and you are going to digitally sign it. This is, you are going to just take your private key and sign or encrypt hash of M. Okay? And then you are going to sign M, which is unencrypted, and a signed version of the hash, saying here is the document, here is a signature. Okay, so in this case, this string here, which is the signed version of the hash, is your digital signature. Okay, so now you can still verify that you signed the document, because anyone else can take this document M, okay, convert, first generate hash, because the hashing function is well known. You can just take the document and generate the hash. Okay. Then you can take the person's public key and apply it to this string, which will recover the hash. Okay. And you compare the hash. Then you take h of m, you take the public key and extract h of m here, and if the two match, it proves to them that you must assign the document. Okay, is that clear? So if M is altered by someone, because M is unencrypted, okay, you will get a different string M prime. Okay, so if now the hash M prime, that will generate a different hash. So when you extract the hash from here, the two will not match. This allows you the protection to claim that you never signed the altered document. Okay, you can say I signed a document that generated h of M. If M has been modified and is going to generate a new hash h of M prime, the two are not going to match. So you don't have to, nobody can claim that you signed the altered document. Is that clear? Now the reason this is computationally more tractable is signing a fixed length string or encrypting a fixed length string is obviously going to be cheaper than signing an arbitrary length string, which is an arbitrary such document. Clear? We'll come back to all of this and try to put it together in an application that you probably know about, which is secure email. Okay, we'll look at encryption, signatures, and try to put it together and see how can you send a secure email to someone. Okay, but it requires that you understand what is a message digest and whatnot. Okay. So now, in order for all of this to work, you need a hashing function, a good hashing function with certain properties. Okay. The most important property you want is you don't want the probability of the collision. You want the probability of hash collisions to be very, very low. Okay. Because remember, you are not signing the original document. You are signing the hash of that document, which is a fixed length string. If an intruder could find another document, okay, an arbitrary document which hashes to the same value, they can then claim that you signed that document. Okay, so in other words, if there's a hash collision, if two values, so let's say you have M and M prime, okay, if hash of M and hash of M prime are one and the same, and you are actually signing hash of M, then the intruder somebody can claim you signed M prime instead. So you want the probability of hash collisions to be low. Okay. Any hashing function, as you realize, will have collisions because we are taking arbitrary length strings and mapping it to fixed length values. Fixed length values can only hold a certain number of values. Okay, so given an infinite set of documents, then we are mapping it to a finite set of hash values. So there will be collisions no matter what, but you want the probability of that collision to be as low as possible. Okay. Second, what you don't want is the reverse to be possible. Given a hash h of M, you shouldn't be able to generate a string that is going to give you that value. Because I gave you a hash, let's say hash is 32. Okay. If you can now generate all possible strings, so that if you apply the hashing function, it generates value 32 or any string for that matter, that also breaks this protocol, because now you can actually, given h of M, generate M prime that maps to the M. And then you can claim that you signed some other document, which also you don't. So these are all properties only. It's infeasible to find messages x and y such that h of x is equal to h of y, or given a digest x, it should be infeasible to computationally create y such that h of y is going to be x. Okay, so you want good hashing functions with this property. So all of these digital signatures are going to be based on our ability to choose a good hashing function that has these properties. Okay, without that, you are not going to be able to do this well. Okay. There are many hash functions. There is one called MD5, which stands for Message Digest 5, which I'm not going to go into. It also uses a key, and it uses an arbitrary length string to generate a fixed length string. But in the interest of time, I'm going to skip MD5. Mostly because MD5 is no longer used in practice. It's not a secure hashing function anymore. It uses 56-bit keys, and you can now launch brute force attacks to break it. Okay, what brute force attack means is you can start enumerating every possible string and use the hash function. Because MD5 is a well-known hash function. The hashing function is known. If I could list every possible string and then just hash it and find the hashed value, and I could just computationally search through all the space, I will be able to find two keys or any other string that created this hash and things like that, which you don't want to happen. Okay. So what most hashing functions do is you basically don't use smaller number of bits, you use more. Okay. The ones that are used today is called SHA hash function, which stands for Secure Hash Algorithm. Okay, so unlike MD5, which uses 56 bits, SHA-1 uses 160 bits. Okay. SHA-2 uses a family of two hash functions. One of them is 256-bit keys and the other is 512-bit keys. And SHA-3 and so on. As you use more bits and use longer hashes, probability of collision goes down, the probability of launching brute force attacks reduces because you need too much computational horsepower to launch brute force attacks and so on. Okay, so if you use anything like SSH or OpenSSL or anything like that, you will know that there are these hashing functions. So most of the modern encryption protocols that need any form of hashing will actually use SHA hashing. MD5, which was popular maybe 10-15 years ago, is not used anymore. Okay, but the book actually has a good description of MD5. If you're just curious to know what MD5 actually is. And the book is also 10 years old, so it doesn't have any modern hash functions. Okay. So the other thing is that actually this hash function is designed by the government and National Security Agency, which is NSA. There was in fact a talk by a faculty job talk a few weeks ago, where the person came and claimed that there are some security researchers who believe that SHA function is not as secure because there's a backdoor to actually break the hashing function, and they're trying to see if they can prove that there is a backdoor. Of course, nobody has proved it yet, but they're trying to figure out, because some of the values that are chosen are magic numbers, they're integers that are chosen. You don't exactly know how they were chosen, and do they actually have some properties that you don't know about that can be used to break it. So, but be that as it may, there's just speculation by suspicion by some security researchers. As of today, this is the most secure hashing function that's widely used. Okay? It's not to say that you shouldn't use it or something. I'm just mentioning what some researchers claim or are trying to prove. Okay. So with all of that, let's talk a little bit about a secure key exchange or symmetric key exchange. This is how a client and a server would pick a key for encrypted communication. So let's say a client wants to communicate with the server. Okay. You have to first pick a key for that session. Okay. The question is, how are you going to pick a key? And you're going to base that based on a few different ideas, and we will see how to do this. So basically our problem is that before you communicate, you have to agree on the key. So the server has to generate a one-time session key that Alice and Bob are going to use for encryption, and then you are going to use that subsequently. So I'm going to show you two ways to do this. First way requires a third party to help you generate the key. Okay, this is called a key distribution center or a KDC. Okay. So you basically, if you want to send a encrypted message to your friend, okay, first two of you have to decide a key that you are going to use. Okay? So one way is you approach a third